order. Someone move item 1.02.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Okay, Mr. Cordone?
Yes.
Okay. Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
And Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
This brings us to the public forum portion of our meeting, and as we are meeting online, I would like to remind the public that you can share your thoughts or ask your questions of us in a couple of ways. You may go to our district website and click on Board of Education questions and inquiries, and it will take you to, I believe, our email. If you want to write this down, you may access us through email at clerk@fulton.cnyric.org. Would someone move item 1.04?
Move it.
Second?
Discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mr. Cordone?
Yeah.
Mrs. Albagore?
Yes.
Mr. Crandall?
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons?
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme?
Yes.
And Mrs. Cooper?
Yes.
President's report. We have a meeting September 22nd. I want to ask tonight, I did not know until today that the governor had extended our ability to meet remotely. That extension goes until October 4th. So I'm asking tonight of you if you want to continue to meet remotely or if you want to try an in-person meeting. So who would like to kick off the conversation?
I'd like to meet in person.
Okay.
I'd like to meet remotely.
And that's where we started. We have two opinions. And so doing a straw poll, I found that the majority was willing to meet remotely. We have a couple of colleagues that have very particular reasons, personal reasons for preferring to meet remotely. I understand that there's some people that think that, this is not right. I would like to make a couple of points here for any viewing public. We are volunteers and we have no other option. We either meet remotely or in person. And if someone has an extenuating circumstance, there's no way other than to just be absent from a meeting. There's no taking time off. There's no way for somebody to say, I'm going to take a break other than to just not attend. My concern with that is of course, always being worried that we have a quorum so that we can conduct the business of the district. So for me, if this works best for everyone, I'm all for it. I would also point out that our participation from the public has been significantly increased since we've gone remote, which is, I find very interesting. And it's a good thing. So with that said, I myself have reasons that it's better for me to meet remotely. And until I absolutely have to, I would prefer to meet this way myself until I'm told that I cannot have this as an option. So again, I'm going to open the floor up because there is differing opinion. And if there's anything that somebody needs to bring to our attention that hasn't perhaps been thought about, now's a good time.
I think your point, Robin, about, board members, those that really have the need to meet remotely, to have to choose to be absent would be unfortunate for the board because I think all the voices need to be heard. So I support meeting remotely.
Thank you for that, David. And that really goes to the heart of it is the representation. And I appreciate your comments very much. Tim, I understand your viewpoint. I don't not appreciate it. I want you to know that. I just don't know how to make it work for everybody other than this way. We don't have a different model
I'm fine with doing it this way if that's what we have to do.
Okay. I just wanted to say that I did investigate whether or not we could do a hybrid, and we just don't have enough technology to make that work, because that was something I inquired about today. Again, I think it's the second time I've inquired, and we really don't have the technology to make it work well, especially for our viewers. So this is the best model we have to allow for our community to actively be involved or watch the meeting and participate in real time. So I'm hearing, I think, that we're going to continue remote for the next meeting. Yes. And I thank you all for this conversation. The second conversation tonight is the need to let Mrs. Perry know what we're thinking about our attending the convention. So she needs the numbers so she can register us. It is online over a period of 2 weeks. While this may be a little challenging for some, if you can do as much as you can, I mean, that's and gain knowledge, I think that's always good for the district.
Is there the same amount of forums and presentations that there normally would be?
From what I looked at, Tim, it did look like a fair number of opportunities and a variety of topics to be covered.
Okay.
I would also ask, in light of our financial concerns, those that are attending the early bird. So like, if you're going to attend an early bird, could you please let us know right away? And I'd like to keep that to just a couple of board members per each early bird to try to contain our costs this year. If you are in agreement with that, that's just my thought.
Oh,
Is it the law conference that is first, Robin?
That's one, I think. And isn't there a communications one also? I think there's two. So what we've been trying to do is split up, like last year, a couple of us did communication, a couple did law. I'm just suggesting we continue like 2 and 2 and try to contain, help with our cost containment. And then we can report out back to the rest of the board.
I know that my costs will be borne by BOCES, so.
Okay.
No.
All right, Dave, that's good. Then we'll move that aside. So there's room for a couple of people to attend the early birds. So Jean, what's a good date for us to get back to you? What's the date you need to know by?
How about a week from today?
Okay, so by next Tuesday, if Jean hasn't heard from you, then you will not be registered. All right. Your assignment is get to let Jean know by next Tuesday. And then lastly, it is that time for me to take a moment and remind anybody that's watching, if you have not already completed the census, please, I beg of you to do so. The census is important to our community as well as our school community. The census has much to do with how the resources at the federal level are distributed to communities around the country. And it is in our best interest to make sure everyone is counted. So please, if you have not, it is rather simple. You can go online and complete the process. I believe you can go online, and if you need help, there's numbers that you could call if you need some assistance. I'm also going to ask you to do one other thing. Please ask those people that you may talk to complete the census. We'll take all the help we can get to get this done and to try to count everyone in our community. All right, I'm done, and I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Polvino.
Well, good evening, everybody. Normally, a couple months ago, this would have been, we had a great first day of school with kids, but not today. This year, we did our orientation the other day, last Wednesday, and then our teachers and our administrators continued on their work today. We'll continue that tomorrow in preparation for our remote learning kickoff on Thursday and Friday this week. So we'll talk a little bit more about that in a while. The first report tonight is the grants report. Mr. Carroll, could you start that off? I know a number of us are going to chime in, but go ahead.
Okay, sure. Would you like me to present the spreadsheet?
Yeah, that would be fine.
We can all work off of that one. Okay.
Yep.
right.
Also, in your backup, we added a memorandum that has a description of each of the grants for everybody as well. Should be in your, as one of the documents as well. I'm not, it wasn't in the copied one, but you'll have it in the, it's on the online version. It has a brief description of each of the types of grants that we presently have here in the Fulton City School District.
Can we see this well? Would we like it a little larger? Let's see.
If you can make it a little larger, please. I failed to put my glasses on this evening, so my guess is it's small for everybody. So, thank you.
That better?
Yep.
All right. Good evening, everyone. I will kick off the grant presentation with an overview of our federal title grants. Okay, starting with our largest one, our Title I grant. This is our largest chunk of federal money. Of course, that's apportioned based on poverty rates. This covers a wide range of expenses, multiple positions, as well as multiple types of professional development opportunities, curriculum development, and materials. Next is our Title I School Improvement Grant. So this is $50,000. That stayed the same the last couple of years. This is in direct relation to our ESSA accountability status. So you'll remember a couple meetings ago, we presented our DSIP plan. The funds from Title I School Improvement are intended to be directed towards school improvement efforts or related costs that come with that DSIP plan. And we receive $50,000 as a focus district. If we'd had schools that were not in good standing, we'd receive more funds for each of those. Next, our Title IIA allocation is intended for supplemental funding to support effective instruction, and for that purpose, we dedicate those funds to 1.5 of our instructional coaching positions. Next, a fairly small allotment, and it's actually shared. We share this grant in partnership with the Oswego City School District. Title III funds are directed towards programs for English language learners. This year, we're allocating most of our share of that money towards additional tutoring services for our English language learners to help support them during this remote and hybrid.
Dan, is that number driven by enrollment?
Yes, enrollment of English language learners.
Right, and so
Yep.
aren't we seeing an increase in that group, that subgroup?
A slow increase. Now, quite honestly, I don't know the formula behind the apportioning of that. I know that it is enrollment driven based on the population, but I don't know how the formula is.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, if that's a number we should actually be seeing increase, but it's not.
That's a good question.
Yeah, we can look into that, Dave. I see if
Yeah.
you look over the 3 years, it went from 67.16 to 62.28. So we can get a confirmation on that number. We've been sitting right around 45, but I can get the actual number for us.
Thanks.
You're welcome.
In Title IV, also known as 21st Century Schools, this is another place where we're using some of the funds to pay for coaches, our STEM coaches, stipends for our PBIS coaches, and some of our other additional stipends for different instructional roles. Title V is, with Title V, we have a bit of flexibility, and we use this to cover our remaining coaching and also to provide additional professional development. We're also using some of these funds to stipend some work for a family engagement coordinator. We realize, excuse me, that with the new environment, a focus on family engagement is going to be critical, reaching out to those families who are learning entirely remotely. And this allows us to coordinate those efforts through one staff. UPK, with our UPK grant, we just want to create some awareness around the fact that while we have our budgeted allocation of $657,000, if we receive that 20% cut on that UPK aid, we wanted to make sure that the board's aware of how differently that funding looks. We're down almost $100,000 in that case, or more.
So just to kind of back up Dan on that one, just so you know, the only 20% reduction that we're seeing right now, because these are grant funds, is in the area of UPK. We've not received any word of 20% reductions in any other of these areas that are identified in your grant report. Keep our fingers crossed that they don't touch in those areas as well.
Absolutely.
Sorry about that, Dan.
No, thank you. Actually, now I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Tiffany for the homeless grant update.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening, everyone. The homeless grant, or McKinney-Vento grant, is a relatively small allotment but important item for our grants report. It has not changed from last school year and continues to total $55,000. And that supports a contract with Oswego County Opportunities. And they employ a runaway and homeless youth specialist who supports and provides services to our displaced and homeless youth. That's to improve attendance, engagement, academic success. She works in a variety of ways through crisis intervention, assessment, counseling, academic supports, and many referrals in our community. And in addition, the grant provides tutoring and mentoring services to students who are McKinney-Vento eligible in the grades 7 through 12. And she works 10 hours a week, again, with those grade levels. Our numbers right now, we have 47 students starting off the year identified as homeless. And our total last year, at some point throughout the year, we had 241 students who were identified as McKinney-Vento eligible.
And what expenses does that grant allow for? Is it transportation? Is it staff? Is it primarily transportation? It's
primarily our staffing. So that OCO contract. So a lot of preventative work with our runaway and homeless youth specialist, as well as our McKinney-Vento mentor tutor. So that staffing is shared with our community schools.
So the transportation piece is borne locally, right? The taxpayers cover that. There really isn't a funding source for that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
State aid actually covers transportation aid, does cover a portion of that, but there's no set aside funds in this grant. Yes.
That is all I have for that. Are there any other questions?
Okay. All right. Thanks, Liz. Back to me with our 2 early college high school grants, which we're so proud of. The kids are already off and running with their programs. We have our IT grant, for which we received $200,000, and our medical group at $100,000. So that funding covers program coordinators, it covers professional development for both GRB staff and the CCP staff, and for collaboration between them. In the case of the IT grant, it actually covers some tuition costs for our students, because in this case, they are taking a course on campus at CC. And I think, Mr. Palvino, are you going to take it from here with the CARES Act?
Yeah, I'll speak a little bit to the GEARS. So the GEARS is it's the CARES Act money. The first part is the governor's Emergency Education Relief Fund. That was a new grant this year. And this came through the Division of Budget and Legislative Pandemic Adjustment. And what it's focused on is specifically, we were able to purchase over 700 Chromebooks to add to the district to ensure that all of our students K through 12 have access to a one-on-one device. So that's an increase. Remember last year we might have had 1 or 2 in a home, versus this year the goal is every single student has a Chromebook. Anything you'd add to that, Mr. Lisi, or is that accurate?
No, that's accurate. Our plan changed where it's 1-to-1, where students are bringing them back and forth, so we anticipate a greater level of loss. So we want to make sure we have enough in district.
Okay, thank you. The other part of this, that was 201,000, and then the other part, and if you add these up, it actually comes out close to the 1.83 million. If you remember, that's what the CARES Act was total. And then the ESSER part, which is the CARES Act, that's the elementary and secondary school emergency relief funds. And this really focused, and what we did was we were actually able to cover the equivalent of 6 teacher positions. And we repurposed them because you can't supplant. So what we did, and I will tell you that Betsy took the lead. That's one of the last projects that she did, that she worked on, was working on this grant. And so what we've done is, because you never want to be, that supplant piece, you said you could, we didn't necessarily believe that. So what we did was we made sure that we've covered 6 positions in this grant. And you can see them listed in your piece there, but there's the counselor at GRB, a STEM teacher around the drone program that we're doing, college and career readiness support. And then that's kind of really goes to the work that we were doing in our career readiness lab with Ms. Ferlito there. We've looked at attendance and behavior academic support positions at GRB and Fulton Junior High, and we got very creative with that. That actually helps support the vice principal position at the high school, as well as the dean position. So again, getting creative on how to utilize these funds and within the parameters that are provided. The tech coach at GRB, we're able to supplant or deal with addressing the support there. That's Dan Sherman as part of his role. So we're able to support part of that. And then it also supports 3 technicians. So what we've done is, it's our way of saying, all right, this 1.183 million came in. This is how we're going to best utilize this for the Fulton City School District. So again, the concern you have, if you remember in this grant, that the governor took $1.183 million out of, or 383, I'm sorry, 1.383 million out of our original run, brought us down, and then re-added the CARES money back in. That's this money. So remember, that's a grant filling in a hole. So that's why, if you notice, a number of these positions, we've gotten creative on how we're funding those this year, but we'll be able to, so we've got that in mind about how we would address that in the next year. So it's just something we wanted to point out. Is Kathy Adams on the call tonight? I'm not sure if she is or not, or if I can speak to I can speak to the IDEA and 619. I'm not sure, I didn't see her name listed. So if she's there, chime in. If not, the IDEA funds the allocations are there. You'll see that our 611 grant, that's our school age grant for the Individuals with Disability Education Act. And this really focuses on, it supports a number of ICT teachers, which is our integrated co-teacher programs, a couple of teacher aides. It actually supports half of our director of special education services, which is Ms. Adams. It allows for 1.5 of our school psychologists, and it also pays for a clerical position. And then 619 is the early childhood preschool aspect of that, a much smaller grant, $52,000. The good news is our IDA funds went up by $18,000. And that's, if you look, it's actually the highest number figure that we've had since 15-16. It is based on numbers. And then also for our pre-K, that's been rather stable over the years as well. So those are all of our grants. Are there any questions with respect to the grants?
Yeah, is there any further breakdown as to how the money is allocated within each group?
Whoop, can you go ahead again, Nick? It broke up a little bit on you. I'm sorry.
What are the chances of getting a breakdown of how the money is allocated within each group?
Yeah, we have those figures. We know where it's driven staff-wise. I could drive that to you. That's not an issue. We know exactly, like, for example, I indicated like half of Kathy Adams' salary, for example, is picked up in IDEA.
Uh-huh.
So we could do that. Again, we really look at it as part of all the funds together, Nick. So it addresses a lot of different positions, but we could identify that if you'd like.
Yeah,
Yep.
please.
Okay. Just writing that down. Okay.
It'll help me to understand it more.
All right.
Or
Yep.
better, I should say.
Sure. Yeah. Just, it's interesting when you really look at grants coupled with all of the different aids and all the different, you're right. It's all, a lot of different pieces make up this wonderful puzzle we call our district. So, yeah. All righty. So that's the conclusion of the grants report. Dan, can you pull that down, please? Find my notes here. Of course, everything got shuffled here. The next thing, Dan, is the enrollment figures. Do you want to go over those, please? These are our latest enrollment figures.
Sure. And let me find those. Okay. And these are hot off the presses this afternoon. And that's important because enrollment is a moving target in the beginning of the school year, and no more so than this year. Okay. So again, these numbers are as of today. And so any year, the central registration office is one of the busiest offices this year or this week of school, right? In a typical year, might see a line out the doorway of Mrs. Blazinski's office of families moving into the district and registering. This year, of course, as is everything in the COVID environment, this becomes more complicated with the addition of the online option and also the cohorting at the junior high and GRB. So these are numbers that now we really have to look at every day as we have new families register. So to give you a sense of what we're looking at here, starting with Fairgrave, and one thing to point out initially, of course, we still think of our sixth graders very much as part of our elementary buildings. As we present these numbers, it's really from the standpoint of capacity. This is a big way in which we're using these right now to make sure that we know how many students can fit physically in each of the buildings, and also with our online space in terms of our number of online only teachers. So you'll see the sixth grade numbers appear in the junior high. This is to give you a sense of how many students are physically in person on a given day at each building. So moving on to Granby. So in Fairgrave, that would be 215 in person on a given day. In Granby, in person, we have 249 students in school Tuesday through Friday. And again, this gets more complicated, of course, again this year because our class sizes are so much smaller. We really are tight as a drum in terms of our capacity for students and finding their spots in the buildings for our in-person students. At Lanigan, we'll have 243 K-5 students from Tuesday through Friday. 123 Lanigan students have chosen the online option. And at Valney, we are at 184 in person and 72 virtual. So we are reaching that point where to place students, we really have to look. We're starting to see some spots close, some grade levels close at certain buildings for in-person instruction. And so the choice then becomes for the family to, if they prefer the in-person option, that they won't necessarily be able to go to their neighborhood school or their catchment school, or that they choose online.
Would the CARES Act money at all support preventing students from having to go to a different school other than their home school?
Well, it's the combination. It's not only the ability to hire more staff, it's also the physical space. The physical spaces are really maxed out. In most of the buildings, there wouldn't be an available room to add another section. So the CARES Act, and please, Mr. Palvino.
Yeah, what I would say, it's a great question. I think what we're going to do, just like we're doing with a number of things, is we're going to progress monitor this very closely. We humbly requested that families, when they chose remote, know that we wouldn't want them moving back in during that first marking period. However, at that 5th, 6th weekend, right around that first week in October, we're going to reassess. And then what we'll do is if we have an increase, obviously we need to take a look at our model, look at our numbers. We may have kids or families are going the other way. Maybe the great thing would be that things would be looking really wonderful in our district and in the country around this pandemic. So it really doesn't offset anything as far as it's part of our whole, the 1.383 million is really part of the $73 million budget package that we have. Does that answer your question, Dave, or?
Yeah, no, I was just wondering because, I'm thinking from the student perspective that, obviously putting, they need to make connections with staff, and preventing from having to be moved around after the school year starts is another concern, giving them another transition at an already challenging time. So there seem to be a lot of moving pieces, and that's why I was wondering it might not be economically we might want to we have a great desire to always be conservative as we are, but under these circumstances, I was wondering if that would provide flexibility and support our kids.
Yeah, not a whole lot. No different because it's supplanted the monies that the state normally got. We had a 1.383 reduction put back in, so we're actually flat funded this year's the way it came back from the state. Unfortunately, and obviously the other piece that has to come out, is that impact and everything is the 20%. That we've been, you notify the state. It's very clear that so far we've taken 20% of our excess aid in July and in August. And so, the larger amounts start coming in soon, but at this point, without any ever more federal support, it does look like that the governor has indicated since April that we may be looking at 20% reductions across the board. And obviously that could have impacts in the near future.
Thank you.
Dan, go ahead. Yep. Sorry.
So here's our 6th graders, physically placed at the junior high, but still connected with their elementary buildings. Remember that the junior high, grades 6, 7, 8 are cohorted, where students are attending in person, either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday. Total in the junior high, there are 517 students, but again, that group of 517 is divided into those 2 cohorts. So on a given day in the junior high, there will be 259 students here for in-person instruction. Same model at GRB, where students are in either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, Friday. On a given day, that will result in 372 students in person as a cohort. And 263 students are learning online. Yeah, please.
I just had one other general question, and it's this presentation is reminding me that I don't think I asked it before. How are we taking attendance, especially when I see the numbers of the virtual students, and we know that we're required to take attendance for all students, not just those physically present.
Yeah,
because that's tied to
good question.
Wow,
it's something that we're
having that conversation. As we're having that conversation about, a potential reduction in state aid, there is the wonderment of, will the governor look for, ways to reduce state aid, and that we know it's driven by attendance. And so systems, and what are those for all of these virtual learners?
Okay. Yeah, great question. And it's not only still related to state aid, it's still related to accountability. Chronic absenteeism is still very much part of our accountability responsibility. So we've had a couple groups working on defining attendance in the virtual world. One is our attendance task force, and also coming from the standpoint of working in the remote environment and what makes sense to take attendance was a task force subgroup of our elementary and secondary curriculum colleges. Okay, we had two groups looking at this from a couple different angles, and really what we've landed on is a model that looks, in terms of the way we report attendance, we'll be doing it exactly the same as we do for in-person students in school, reporting attendance out of school. So in elementary, teachers will, our online teachers.
What will the mechanism be?
Yeah, so that'll take place first.
I'm sorry, Dan.
Their daily in elementary. We've got a tough connection here, I think.
Dan, I think we also have a slide in the update in the next PowerPoint with respect to attendance as well.
Okay, you can wait.
True. We do.
Yeah, that may be helpful because it's got some bulleted points that may be good.
Look for it. Thanks.
Good idea.
All right, thank you. All right.
And finally, UPK. Finally, actually, the whole breakdown by grade band: 68 UPK in person, 30 virtual. 2,152 of our students have opted for in-person instruction compared to 890 virtual. And you see the overall. So we are still hovering at about that 30% choosing the online option. And we are getting more inquiries each day. I think as some families get nervous as the actual first phase.
Okay. All righty. Any questions around the enrollment figures? Our numbers are looking pretty good. As a district, I didn't get the total today, actually. We were running just over 3,100. I'm not sure what the latest number total was. Is that the total on the bottom there or not?
3140.
Yes, it is. UPK 12 is 3140.
Yep.
So, all righty. Any other questions around that piece? All righty. The next report is the reopening update. What I'll do is I'll drive and talk at the same time. Know that I won't be able to see you, so please make sure that I'm flying blind, if you will. So please let me know, or Robin always give me a heads up. All right. Let me see here. And we'll go to present. Oh, come on. Here we go. Slideshow from the beginning. All right. So we wanted to provide there's so many pieces. I will say that we went through our assurances the other day. And if I would show you, I have a sheet that's all red and oranged and greened up here with all 70. I believe we've got all 78, that we have addressed. There's a lot of those that aren't applicable with respect to facilities, things like that. But I wanted to let you know that. But to kind of highlight some things, because I know our public is obviously, this is one of our mechanisms for sharing information as well as keeping you informed as a board. The first slide is around schedules and back to school information. And some of the things we mailed information by September 4th. I know emails went out, lots of information, kindergarten really through 12th grade, as well as UPK was reaching out to their parents. And so want to make sure that, just anybody out there, if you haven't received any information, please let us know. It should be in your mailboxes. And also check the email, district website. There's a lot of good information out there. The app is taking off in a major way. I'll slide back to the app. Dom, I'm not sure what our number was, but I know it's steadily increasing on a daily basis. Anything you'd add to that? Yes,
Sorry, not really. It is increasing significantly. So.
Okay. And it's really important because that'll tie into a lot of the things that we're doing. So I think the more and more we can get that out there as one of our really strong pieces, of very easy to work through. It may really be helpful to our families. So we'll continue to put that out there and remind people that it's there. Transportation information. The elementary went out on, I believe it was Friday morning, it was in the mail. And I know secondary was in the mail this morning. So all K through 12 is now out there. And they worked all weekend because I was on the phone with Mr. Henry and Mr. Crump and Mr. Lisi, and they were working on that over the weekend as we were cleaning that up. And part of that was driven by making sure that we understood who our cohorts were and the remote learners and all of those different pieces that we've really never had to break down. So it took an extra couple of days to get that. We're about a week off normally where we normally would be. Oops. So screening at the bus stop, just a reminder, we'll be doing all students riding the bus with their temperature taken before boarding. It's not an assessment. They're just collecting that information. That was a question that we had received. How come? And that just like anybody else, they can't do assessments. What they're doing is collecting that information. And if it's a child with 100.0 or higher, they're not permitted to get on the bus. The other thing is we're reminding our families, I think this is important for the board to know, that we want to be sure to provide adult supervision for the kids at the bus stop, or minimally have someone readily available to provide supervision until each child is screened and cleared. And that's important. We're going to have a couple roving vans out there, and we'll be able to get those kids back home, either walking them home right from where they are, or if we have to transport, we could take care of that as well. So we've got some plans in the background to address that, but the key is we want to make sure that our kids depart and they meet the new requirements that we have per the COVID. So I think that's really important. Also a reminder that all your contact information should be updated. This
Brian,
is something
how are we going to notify families that they need somebody at that bus stop? How are we going to communicate that to families? I know we're talking about it here, but most of our families don't watch.
Yeah, so I've been incorporating, that'll be incorporated into videos this week. I mentioned it last week in one of my videos. Actually, this is one of the slides, this one I have pulled up there. So what we're going to do, I think that was Miss Cooper, right? Yeah. I recognize the voice. Yeah, we're going to make sure that those are the types of things that are going to go in our short video clips this week from me. And then obviously in any correspondences that'll go out from the schools. We're really going to try to blitz a little bit more with some really important information for families each day. We'll also follow that up with our Google Meets on Thursday and Friday, which are really the orientations for kids and really getting to know their teachers and vital pieces of information, as well as we'll get that out to our families.
Okay.
Brian, are we doing teachers also every day school is in session?
Doing what? Screening them?
taking their temperatures and screening them?
Yes, they fill out every single member in the Fulton City School District takes their temperature, and they also fill out the 4 questions each and every day.
Okay.
And staff that worked here this summer, so for example, any of our, if you will, 12-month staff, so all of our custodians, things like that, we actually started that back in early July. We actually started that screening process, and really what got us moving probably more than anything was our summer extended school year program. That's where it really got us going in the niche. So now we have to, and it was hard because it's hard to remember every day to do that. But once you get in the routine, so that's what we're doing right now. Our staff started signing in last week, and then they would have signed in today. I sent a letter to the entire staff as well, reminding them of the expectations late last week after our meeting on orientation day.
Brian,
well. Yep.
I have a question. If teachers go from school to school, will they have to have their temperature taken at each school, or just original when they go into the first one?
Yeah, so what happens, that's a great question, Lynn. What happens is that when you screen in the morning, you screen into the school. So for me, I screen into the junior high here, and I go into the same one I've actually been in. And so I screen in here, and then say I was going to go to Lanigan, I would go to Lanigan, and the door greeter would be there to take my temperature if I needed to. But what happens is actually what I do is I let them practice on me. So I actually like to see if my temperature was right. But if I didn't have to do that, I can walk in. There's a sheet that they take my name, and then they check off a box. I tell them I'm already online cleared. So if if you're a visitor coming into a building and you have not been screened into another place, then you will screen any visitor would screen into each building as a visitor. If you're a staff member, you screen in the ones, and then you check in at the greeter station, and they check you into the building the time you entered and the time you would leave.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. That's a good question. One of the things that we've started, and I think this is probably one of the most important slides that you'll hear, and one of the things we're going to reinforce a lot this week, and obviously over the next few weeks as we get the routines going, it is essentially your child does not come to school if they're exhibiting any of the following symptoms. You could supplant that with child or staff member shouldn't come to school if they're exhibiting any of the following symptoms: fever or chills, cough, shortness of breath or difficulty breathing, fatigue, muscle or body aches, headache, new loss of taste or smell, sore throats, congestion of runny nose, nausea or vomiting or diarrhea. Any of those things, you need to stay home. That's the first line of actually keeping all of us safe, is that our staff and our students, if you're not feeling well, and I'm not one to talk, but I'm getting better at this, is that if you're not feeling well in the morning, don't come to your school if you're exhibiting any of these. Because if you exhibit these, any of these characteristics or these symptoms, then you're going to need to go home. And on the next slide, you'll see why. Oops, if I could stop there. Let's see. Oh, come on, Bri. There we go. So this is actually Department of Health guidelines. We were supposed to get, they keep talking about updates, things like that. They're actually more strict than CDC. So we had a call as late as this morning. We were hearing last week that this was going to be adjusted a bit. But this is the guidance. This is what's in our plan because this is what's been in place. But per the New York State Department of Health guidelines, all staff or students who are sent home or exhibiting those symptoms need to maintain at minimum a documentation of evaluation by a healthcare provider with a note clearing them, and a negative COVID-19 test and a symptom resolution. We did see more a little bit late this afternoon, and we're still working on this about recommendation, that is. So more to follow on that. It's one of the areas where we keep being told there was going to be an adjustment on this, but this is that they have not changed. So it's important that these criteria have to be met. This is what we got from the Department of Health as recent as this morning. So again, this is an area where it's important if you're sick, don't come to school. I mean, I think that that's an important piece because if you have those symptoms, we will be very strict. This is about, whoops, I'm sorry, papers.
Brian, do we know how available the testing will be for families that might have to go through those steps? Because I can't imagine the turnaround time will be very quick, or do we have a handle on that?
Yeah, and Mr. Cordone, you just shared one of my, obviously one of our frustrations. We've got in our plan the listing of the different sites that are available. I think on 4 out of the 6, I believe there's 6 on there. There may be more. That they require a doctor's, not going to call it prescription, but referral. Because I would question the insurance on those because and so that's a piece there. I have voiced my opinion in a number of different forums on this. In fact, I spoke to some colleagues in Onondaga County, and they had actually had a meeting with their Department of Health, and they spent over an hour and a half on this topic. And my understanding is they didn't get any other resolution at this point either. That's why we were looking for some guidance. Unfortunately, the guidance that we got, that we heard that was coming out, is we have a new COVID dashboard that was announced on Friday. We got an email about 10 of 1 today for a 1:30 webinar, and they were gracious enough to give us till 5 o'clock instead of 3 o'clock to fill out our COVID annual or daily screening. So this is a very difficult topic, Mr. Cordone. We're working on it. Obviously, one of the concerns that we all have is the availability of all of our wonderful medical personnel in the community being able to serve, the number of kids or staff members. So that's my concern. I think my point to somebody was today, I get a headache each day, and it's really related to the stress and the different headaches that come with trying to deal with all the new guidance that comes out all the time. But I said, according to that, I'd have to be tested. And so, my concern is that we're focusing on this. We will continue to work and within the confines of the guidelines of New York State, but we continue. We had a meeting with Dr. Morgan this morning, who's our medical director, who was part of a meeting with us and 2 other districts that he serves as their medical director. So we continue on this. They were putting together a letter to all of the providers in the community as well. And I did see a draft of that letter this afternoon as well.
Will our students who are waiting for a test result or who are self-quarantining be able to, even if it's temporarily, convert to a remote situation?
Yeah, we're going to have to make sure that kids have access. This is all about access. It's just another challenge. But, with my background and all of ours, and what we need to do is it's all about access and making sure our kids, because it's not their fault that we have to follow, these steps. What we want to do is make sure that everybody's safe, but we also want to make sure that our kids and our staff have great teaching and learning experiences as well.
And Brian, I want to go back to the basics for a second. Are we spending enough time on hand washing? There is a right way to wash hands. It's the friction more than the soap. And I'm wondering if we're going to make certain that our young people understand that the friction, the action actually has more effect.
Yeah, there's a series of videos that have been put together starring our children, our students here in the district. And I know that there's been a team putting those together. Those will be part of and be ongoing accessible to our students as part of our Thursday and Friday sessions with kids this week. They'll also be on our website. And my expectation will be, as kids enter our schools, that they work on those. Those types of those skills are as important remotely as they are in person. And so those are lifelong skills. So yes, they're part of a video package as required, and part of the teaching that's required for all students as part of the assurances. And our staff actually went through a series of trainings this past Wednesday as well.
Brian, if my student wakes up with one of the symptoms, if he's got a cough, fever, how long are we asking them to be symptom-free before they return to school?
And that's the $1 million question. I really want to look at everybody. I'm really struggling, but I'm going to be okay. So that's the issue that we're having, Ms. Cooper, is that there are some out there that talk about 24 hours symptom free. There are others that say you have to have all 3 of those. The Department of Health is still saying we have to have all 3 of those things, and that's where I struggle, and all of us are struggling because and so I know it's not a great answer for your question, but right now we're dealing with those 3 ands that I had on page 6. Right there. Oops. So that's where we're at right now. And I probably I'm thinking as a person who grew up around a medical kind of situation years and years. And I actually brought up the question the other day, does everybody who goes to an ER get tested? I didn't get an answer because the answer was no. yet this was kind of how stringent. If you look at CDC and guidance, it's much less restrictive. So that's why we're trying to get more clarity in this area. But right now we have to roll with what we are, and this is what we are on September 8th.
So Brian, if our students wake up with a cough in the morning, can we just call in the school and they would have accessibility for that particular day, or do they have to be out more than one day in order to join virtual?
Yeah, I would say that we need to have them call in. It's a great question, Brenda, and we will get clarity on that. I want to be very clear about how we're going to do that. It's difficult to shift in one day for a student on that day.
Okay.
It's a great question, though. And these are the kinds of questions I'm sure that are being asked across the state and nation. So, all right, our school meals, we've put those out into the community. All of our kids have access. We do have access, if you're asked as board members, this Thursday, Friday, and Monday, we do have access to meals, and there is the information with respect to that. So the guidance clearly says any days that you're in session, you have to provide and make sure. And so we have made sure that all of our students, so if they arrive at our buildings between 8:30 and noon on Thursday, Friday, or Monday, they can have that. We're also looking at, let's say you're a Tuesday, Wednesday kid, taking your Thursday, Friday, Monday food home on the bus with you in special paper bags, things like that. That's Miss Warwick has been working on that. So more to follow, but that looks like an opportunity we have there, coupled with obviously pickups will be available on all those days as well. So we're trying to create as much flexibility for our families as possible. Oops. On the mobile app, Dom, do you want to comment on this slide at all? Any more that we want to add to this or not?
No, I think you pretty much covered it. It's out, it's working. We've used the push notifications successfully, and we'll continue using that as part of our media blast. I think it's been fairly successful so far.
Okay, thank you. Dan, you want to talk to the back to school schedule for our kids later this week, or I can do that? It's up to you.
Sure. This is an overview of our first 3 days of school for our students and for our staff. We're calling Thursday and Friday health and safety days because they really are focusing on those videos that Brian described. First thing in the morning at the beginning of their school days, all of our students will join a Google Meet with their either homeroom teacher or guided teacher in high school. And the goals here are really just to be very welcoming, start to establish a sense of community. They'll then turn things over to those COVID videos that have been prepared on the hand washing, on all of our other safety measures, navigating the building in this new environment, so that these procedures, so the students will have been trained initially in these procedures before they enter their building. I'm not sure if Brian mentioned, there's each of our own buildings is kind of has a starring role in these videos along with our students. So the kids will see students they recognize, and also they'll get this training in relation to their own building. We also,
no, go ahead, Dan.
The other half of why we call these health and safety meetings is that this is part of our system of making sure that we reach out that we contact every family right off the bat. We talk a lot in these meetings about how confident we are that we're reaching everyone. So what we've asked our teachers to do following their morning meeting with their students is to personally contact any student's family who was not present in that morning meeting. Okay. Assess, we've done, multiple surveys and different types of outreach to try to find out if they have a device. Here is, one last person-to-person contact to find out, was the device the barrier to not getting on this morning? Was it that you weren't aware? Was it that you don't have Wi-Fi? Was it that you forgot? In any case, let's try to fill that hole and make sure that you're in the next. Same concept Friday morning. Hopefully We have fewer students that teachers will have to reach out to, but again, it'll be that individual outreach to any student who was not present in that morning Google Meet. And if after 2 days contact still hasn't been made, then we'll advance that up a tier in our school home liaisons will get involved. After those contacts are made, teachers will have, we've really prioritized opportunities for collaboration for our teachers, the PLCs, leading up to the first days of instruction. So they'll be with their PLC groups again, preparing for their first full week with students. Monday is a similar concept. Again, that morning meeting with students. For our K-6 students, the teachers will be prepared with a video overviewing what we're calling Special Area Mondays. We've got a team of special area teachers and our new Director of Instructional Support Staff, Will Meekum, preparing what I think is going to be a pretty exciting menu of special area options for our students on those Mondays. And again, after this, kind of a final push for those individual outreach contacts and PLC time. Let's look at our first few days of instruction. By Tuesday, we are rolling full steam ahead with in-person and full days for all.
Yeah, and our remote. All our different programs.
Mm-hmm.
Universal Pre-K, the families will be contacted individually about their child's learning schedule, so that's happening through them. The other thing, there was a question at one of our meetings, and then here's student attendance, but before we go into that, I wanted to bring up, we are working on, and I just didn't get updated late this afternoon, we're looking at doing a kindergarten bus orientation on the 14th. And I just don't know what the logistics in the end, if we finalize that or not late this afternoon. I know we were working on that. And then also we're doing, if you see buses around the community on Thursday, this running bus dry runs, and we'll also be having our aides on those buses. That's the goal, is to really do a dry run about what this would look like, get that feel for the time frame. We aren't going to do it at 6 o'clock in the morning. We'll run them at 8 o'clock because we felt it'd be too confusing if we saw a lot of buses out in the community early in the morning. But we thought we'll probably start those at 8 o'clock, and those will run the entire run, including mocking the disinfecting of the buses in between the runs. I really want them to get a feel for what that's going to, what the time frames are going to look like, that pulling in, pulling out, all of those things. So that's something we're going to be doing this Thursday. Is where we're tentatively scheduled to do that. So I just wanted to add that as well.
Did we hire? I'm sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Lynn.
Did we hire our new aides, or are we utilizing the aides that we have already?
Yeah, we're using our aides. Miss Geithner, do you want to comment on that at all? Or I know you've been working with that division.
Sure. That is one of the responsibilities during COVID that our existing aides will also cover within their schedule.
So some of them, the buses, will they be on a bus?
They will be on the buses. The buses will pick them up at the school where they work prior to the runs beginning, and they will ride the buses and do the temperature screenings at the bus stops, and then be returned with the students back to the building where they're assigned.
So some of the aides will be working at 6:30 in the morning?
6:45, we believe, is the earliest at this point, because Golden Sun does have staff that will be doing the outlying runs that have to go earlier. So we think it will be approximately 6:45.
Okay, great.
For the secondary ones, yep.
Okay, thank you. Student attendance, that was a question we had earlier. Jerry, do you want to speak to student attendance? Or I'm not sure if Liz is still on there, but this is in your domain before you moved.
Absolutely. So student attendance is going to be taken every day, whether a student is in person or virtual. And we will be using School Tool to do that. So K through 6 well, actually K through 12, daily attendance will be taken in school tool. And then for our secondary students in grades 7 through 12, it will also be course or bell by bell attendance entered in school tool as we do during a typical school day or school year. In order to determine if a student is present during remote learning days, Mr. Carroll referenced earlier our various work groups who came up with some definitions of what does it mean to be present on remote learning days. And you can see that the definition that we have come to is that there will be two-way interactions between a teacher and a student regarding academic or social emotional learning. So those things could include participation in a Google Meet. That one's very clear. Either I can see you there, you're present in my Google Meet, or you're not. They could be large group, small group, or individual. Students will also be monitored if they submit a response to a learning activity that the teacher has posted. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a completed assignment. It could be a progress check, a simple question. Do you need assistance with your long-term essay project? And the student responds to the teacher in that way, engages with the content and the learning via whatever method that teacher has posted for that day. Or it's participation in interactive conversation that might be over the phone or even via email with a student, but it's two-way interactive communication about learning.
So a student's going to have to do that grade 7 through 12 and every bell to be counted as present?
There will be daily attendance, so that will be monitored through, I believe, guided study hall or homeroom. So that's your daily attendance. So a student is present for the day if they participate in that, and then it's present for the course if they participate in the assignment or the check-in for the course on those remote learning days.
Okay, so here's my other question for that is the students that I'm worried about are the students with needs that are more social emotional. If we have a student that comes into a normal classroom on a typical day and they're present physically in the class, but they're not turning anything in or doing any work because mom and dad were fighting all night or they're having some mental health issues, we're marking them present. We're not saying, well, if you turn in this assignment, you're present, or if you're participating in class, you're present. What about these students who might not be able to interact because of something going on? I just don't want them getting caught in a loophole or getting cut out because they're having a day or two or a week where they're not able to participate like they normally would.
Yeah, and that really is exactly why we have those check-ins for a teacher to determine why a student is not present or what might be going on that might be a barrier to learning, so that we can then either, if the teacher can resolve that issue, if it's something simple that's within the teacher's purview, they can resolve that. Otherwise, we want to get that student connected to additional supports. So there's not going to be a penalty. Per se, we just want to use this as a measure.
I was just going to say we've kind of yeah. So we've separated with the term engagement though, and for the purposes of grading, unlike the spring where we were really kind of we were kind of thrust into the situation. We've really separated attendance from the grading aspect of student performance.
That's exactly right.
That was a priority. Yep.
So you're present, but that's not contingent upon turning in an essay. You're present. You still are responsible for that work, but it doesn't mean that you're absent if that's not turned in.
And I agree with Fallon. And it makes me wonder, how do students then, will students know if there is the need to connect with a counselor that, that will be a priority for them in the moment, in the situation? Who will be guiding them, with that, so they don't have to worry about going to class, being in a place where, that they can't be, maybe mentally, they're not prepared to be there and they need to connect with a counselor. Will there be guidance for them to know that it's okay and that they can kind of reconnect later with that class?
Absolutely. Our student support team has been working on those outreach efforts. And even in the spring, we had that very comprehensive system where we had lots of early warning I guess for lack of a better description, that triggered that additional support and intervention. So we'll continue to do that. And you will see that there have been lots of creativity. I'll brag a little bit about the school home liaisons who've created Bitmoji offices that will be available to students. So they'll see a little image of their school home liaison, because normally if you were in school, you could just walk down the hall and knock on his or her door, make an appointment, schedule a lunch. You can do that virtually now with the little offices that they've created. So there's an option to schedule an appointment. There's an option to just check in. They've been very creative in doing that outreach. So I'll brag a little bit on them.
Great.
So I just want to make sure that I'm clear and understanding. So we're going to leave it up to the teacher to determine whether or not they feel like they were present or absent. Is that correct?
Following these criteria. So it's not just random. There's the two-way interactive, two-way interactions regarding academic or social emotional learning with the teacher. So that will be the guidance that we use within the remote environment.
So what my concern is for a student who's, let's say, in 9th grade and they've checked in with maybe their first bell or their guided study hall teacher and have let them know that, you know, there's a situation that happened and that they just aren't fully engaged today. Now, how are they? Now they're going to have to go through that same deal and go through that with every class to participate that, or with every teacher to be marked present?
Well, so there's the difference between daily attendance and course attendance. So we talked about, one of our goals was to make this reflect normal school life, right? In which a student might arrive late, a student might arrive at 11, check in at the attendance office, and they're now present for the day, for the day's daily attendance. They have to leave early again later. They were still present for the day. They were absent from those courses, which is important for everyone to know, for parents and all of this.
Are we required by the state to take daily attendance and course attendance?
Daily, yes. Course, no. But it's important information for us.
Yeah, but aren't we holding the secondary teachers to a different standard that we're holding elementary? Because we're not going to be doing course attendance to elementary teachers. And if we're not required by the state, I just don't want to see those students who are going through trauma, then this comes back to them. I don't understand why a daily attendance record wouldn't be sufficient enough if we're doing that K through 5.
I'm wondering also, though, aren't we legally required to demonstrate that we have provided all the same opportunities for synchronous and asynchronous learning? So we kind of do have to take attendance. Is that not accurate?
Well, and going back to the difference between elementary and secondary, elementary doesn't take course by course attendance in typical school. It's daily attendance. So it's the course specific attendance. And to your point, Fallon, about trauma, we really are hoping that attendance, again, separating it out from academic performance, attendance is a good indicator of a data point that we would need to intervene with a student. So if a student is missing from courses on a given day, that's a good trigger for that outreach to occur, to find out what does that student need? What is the barrier that's keeping them from engaging, and connecting them with an adult that they trust to help work through those issues. So it's a really helpful data point in that regard to be trauma sensitive and make sure that we're meeting the needs of those students in that regard.
But in terms of accountability, which is, I think, was brought up earlier, and it wasn't my reason for raising the question of attendance. How are we then, if we're not taking attendance at the secondary level? Because elementary teachers have their kids, a smaller number every day, so their situation's different than secondary. How are we making certain that we can evidence that our students we have taken attendance, and we do have a system in place that does all students the right to the education that they deserve? I guess I'm wondering. So to Fallon's question, though, back to the question of, do secondary teachers take attendance if they've connected with their students remotely every day? Because we have a large number of students who are learning remotely, as we saw in those numbers tonight, and I don't want any of them to fall off the radar. And I also think we can't ignore the fact that the fiscal situation of the state, that could be a very easy avenue for the governor to deny state aid. We've seen what's happened with the transportation aid issue for just a piece of paper. So I guess I'm a little bit concerned about if we're not doing that daily and we're not doing that, class by class.
This has been a great discussion, but I guess I want to bring us back to where we started. We are going to have attendance every day and every class. And I appreciate that a lot of thought went into it. And to your point, Fallon, I'm hopeful that our staff that monitors the social emotional wellness piece, if they see a problem, that they bring it to the attention of their building leadership, and it can be discussed, and we can make adjustments if need be. But I do know that we've always taken attendance per class, and sadly I know that because I had a child that challenged me with a particular class one year, and thank goodness that they did take it by class, or I would not have known that there was a problem. So
I just wanted to clarify from what Dan was saying that it's not there. We're not required though to do it class by class.
No,
but
it makes sense.
That just concerns me if we don't have those systems in place to make sure that we do have a handle on who's engaged and who's not.
That was our concern also.
Right.
And also to Robin's point that parents obviously find that very valuable to know which classes their students are attending or not, if that ever happens.
Well, it wasn't just for me, but even it was able for me to ask the question of administration to say, why is there a problem with this particular class?
Right.
Yeah.
And so parents will be able to see that in school tool like they would at any other time.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. And finally, the final slide, just as a reminder that we are a district that's requiring face coverings for all staff and students. Anybody that's in our buildings with their mouth and nose must be covered on the bus and at school. And I think that just goes back to one of our primary things, excuse me, and our Dr. Morgan, he talks about the best thing we can do is wash our hands, wear our face coverings, and make sure that we're practicing all those things. That's what's actually, he talks about at each of our meetings. Those are the most important things. So it goes to the training and the signage and all of the different things that we're trying to do. But he reminds us on every call, we have to wear our face coverings and also practice good hand washing hygiene and don't touch our faces. So I think we had that on here as well. And with that, I'm going to try to get back to the screen here. See if I can get back onto here. Stop presenting. All right, and that's the end of that report. Obviously, we'll do more. We're going to do more videos. We'll do more updates this week. We submitted our first dashboard today, all zeros. I will say, something that I talked to Robin a little bit about is we're keeping an eye on the numbers in the county. I was disheartened I didn't see anything over the weekend, but today we got our numbers right on time, 4:30. 29 new cases in Oswego County, but 27 of them were SUNY Oswego and one was a nursing home. So 28 out of the 29 were in two very specific locations. So one being the primary location. But there are people on quarantine as well. That number's up to 194. It's on the dashboard. So we're watching the dashboard, meaning the Oswego County Department of Health actually has a dashboard. And so you can keep an eye on those numbers. And I've put a request out and they keep pushing for really wanting to know better numbers in the Fulton area as well. So no, I want the public and I want the board to know that we're continuing to monitor those public numbers because, we may be the governor and everybody talks about our reopening plans and we'll be as good as our plan. We have to remind ourselves that our kids are in our building and our staff are here 7 hours. That means 16 to 17 hours they are not. And so to me, the most important piece was that one of that last slide is a very important piece of information, which is make sure that we practice all of those things that the science is telling us, which is face coverings, making sure we cover our nose and mouths, and making sure that we practice good hand washing hygiene. That's what they say helps us keep us the safest. And so that's a big piece of the work that we're doing with our staff and our kids. And really, that's a big part of our teaching. So I'll stop chattering away, but I think I wanted to draw attention to that because I think that's important to know that we're watching those numbers. And being a small city, those services are in small cities. And where are the highest concentrations of cases in Oswego County? Fulton City and Oswego City. Highest two concentrations in the county. It's on the map. It's not, it's not information that's not out there, but it's information that we're very cognizant of. And that's why we have to remind ourselves each and every day that each one of our practices and our steps that we're taking are essential. And the progress monitoring is essential, that we keep up and keep track of what's going well in areas where we constantly can improve. So, and more to follow communication-wise this week with videos and things like that. So with that, if there's no questions, we'll go to the code of conduct briefly. Jerry's going to do just a very brief. Yep. Is that Brenda?
Yes, that's me.
Okay.
I probably should have asked this when you were talking about the school lunches, but it is part of the reopening. A couple of questions that I had received. Parents are aware that they're not allowed to bring backpacks and that you're going to supply them with a sleeve for their Chromebooks. But what they are asking are they're still concerned about how their students are carrying their lunches. Do they have to bring them in a paper bag? Are they allowed to bring a lunch box? And what is the status on them bringing water bottles from home?
And water bottles. So the paper bags is yes, we're preferring not to bring in those containers. However, if I had a family reached out that they have a child that may have some dietary issues with respect to certain things that they need to bring to school. And so I think we're thinking out of the box, and we'll work with any family that has those types of issues to individualize what needs to be done. That's all about access. Water bottles, absolutely, positively, yes. They can have their own personal water bottle. We have water fillers, if you will, in each of the schools, as well as bottled water there. Those are the two questions. And as far as the backpacks, no. And I know different districts are doing different things. But that's what we chose to do here in Fulton. We talked with our medical director about that. And he also reinforced that he felt that that was the correct strategy to use.
Thank you for clarifying.
Great questions. Well, you know where to find us with more questions. I'm sure there'll be more as we get closer and closer and as we get going. Jerry, Ms. Geithner, can you please just provide a very brief update with respect to the code of conduct, which is our last piece tonight?
Absolutely. Let me present to you the brief change that we're looking at here. So you adopted as a board our code of conduct back at the reorganization meeting at the beginning of July. That was before we received the guidance on school reopening. So what we're proposing is adding this statement to the very beginning, the introduction of the code of conduct, that basically says that in addition to all of the rights, responsibilities, and prohibited conduct outlined in the code, it is an expectation that all students, staff, and visitors will comply with the health and safety protocols outlined in our return to learning plan. And then we obviously tell you where you can find that. We opted for this language because, as you know, our plan evolves with every updated guidance, and rather than update the code of conduct every time there's a change, we would just like to have the language that says the return to learning plan must also be followed.
So that would come to the board in a resolution. You know that each year in July at our reorg, we do the code of conduct. But in accordance with all of our practices, we've always presented, and then at the next board meeting, we put the resolution up. And with that, thank you, Jerry. That's the conclusion to our board report this evening. Thank you.
I wanted to ask my colleagues before I continue on if you would be interested in batching 6.01 through 6.07.
Move it.
Second.
Move it. Yeah, I mean, can we do that when I get to it? I'm asking
Yeah.
if you said, okay, everybody's good with that?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, item 4.01, please.
Move it.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme.
I just have a question concerning those. Some of these are vague as far as I'm concerned. Maintenance contractual or operations contractual, maintenance supply. Can we be more specific as to what we're buying and what the maintenance contractual consists of?
Nick, what we're seeing in the warrants, the detail is what our claims auditor reviews.
Okay.
He does that on our behalf. We're just being asked then to approve her work.
All right.
Because in order to be more detailed, it would be a lot of, it would involve a lot of work to all that paper to be copied in for everybody to view. But that's really what our claims auditor is doing for us, is reviewing that paperwork.
All right.
If there's a particular bill that strikes you as you'd like to know more about it because, say, the number's large, that's something.
I've just noticed that, as I look at these and there's listed one right after another, several of them.
Yes.
Say maintenance contractual, and I'm just wondering what is that?
It's in their contract.
Well, I assume that.
I knew you knew that. I couldn't resist. Thank you for laughing.
Very, yes.
Thank you for laughing with me. I couldn't resist.
Mrs. Lyons.
Yes.
Item 5.01.
Move it.
Second.
Discussion? Mrs. Perry, I'm a yes.
Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme.
Yes.
Would someone move items 6.01 through item 6.07?
Move it.
Second.
Second.
Discussion? Yes. Is there any discussion?
No.
All right. Mrs. Perry, I am a yes.
Okay. Mrs. Albagore,
Yes.
Mr. Cordone,
Yes.
Mr. Crandall,
Yes.
Mrs. Cooper,
Yes.
Mrs. Lyons,
Yes.
and Mr. DeJalorme.
Yes.
Mr. DeJalorme, would you like to kick us off this evening with board forum?
Just thank you to the presenters, and I'm glad that the school year is starting out and is getting off to a good start. Thank you.
Mrs. Lyons.
Sorry.
That's all right.
A lot of good information, and I'm just praying that we keep going and things go simply, I guess.
Mr. Cordone.
Okay.
Mr. Cordone?
Just I appreciate all the updates that the administrative team has given us, and I want to wish our staff and our students a smooth and positive start to the school year under the conditions.
Mrs. Cooper?
Sure, I'll go. So I wanted to kind of piggyback what Brenda had said earlier about discussions about backpacks and lunch boxes and things like that. I can't tell you how many texts and phone calls I'm getting on a daily about the same type of questions. And I know it's in our reopening plan, but our plan is like 61 pages long. That information still isn't getting to families. Is there a way that we can either mail our plan and with those common asked questions to every family? Because those things are just getting missed. And I know that we're referring them to the website and things like that, but not every family has internet access. And so I'm concerned that we're not, and even myself went to look up the backpack thing and couldn't find it on the frequently asked question page on our own website. With school starting so close, I'm just concerned about us being able to communicate those very key points. You know, what we discussed tonight about the buses and getting screened and having an adult there. I think it's really important for us to be able to communicate that home. My other question was, sorry to go back to attendance, but I'm going to go there as well. I just had a couple more things pop up in my brain. If a student has a power outage, does that mean that they're going to be marked absent from school because their power shut off because there was an accident or a down power line? Or my other worry is if their spectrum gets cut off on Wednesday and mom can't pay the bill till Friday, does that make them absent for those days as well, even if they make up those classes? Or if we have a virtual student, but the parents don't get home to work with them until the evening, does that also mean that they're absent on those times because they can't sign in with that teacher? I apologize, but I just want to make sure that we're not missing these students. You don't have to get back to me right now, but if you guys can just think about that and report back, that would be great. And that's all. And thank you to all of our staff and our administration for working so hard.
Good questions, Mrs. Cooper. Thank you. Mr. Crandall.
Here, I just want to thank everyone for their presentations. You know, we're at that point. So, and I think one thing Brian said earlier about how the CDC and the health department are, you know, they're on different pages sometime. And and this is, I don't know how to say this. If you mention that to the health department about CDC guidelines, a lot of times they'll allow what the CDC says is okay. I just know that. And that's it there. I think that's it.
Thank you. Mrs. Abelgore.
Okay. Well, I think that you guys have worked so hard for so long that it's about time to see the fruits of your labor come to play. I think that we're off to a good start. I hope that all of our students are as excited getting back in whatever form of learning they have chosen, as well as the staff. Hopefully they have a great start to the year with not too many snafus. Thank you for the updates. It's always interesting to see the numbers of students we have throughout the district at the start of the year. Just thank you for everything and good luck. And that's about it for tonight.
Thank you. I'd like to thank everyone for all the reports and all the work that went into those reports. More importantly, I want to thank absolutely every employee in this district, from the cleaners all the way up to the superintendent, for your efforts to kick off another school year and hopefully much improved learning and teaching from how we ended last spring. I know a lot of effort has gone into making this possible this year, and I'm hopeful that all of the desires, all of the goals come to fruition for our students and our staff. Secondly, I want to take a moment. I want to thank my colleagues. You folks have been great. There's been a lot of questions. There's been a lot of information coming at everybody. You've been wonderful partners. You've been very patient when it's taken some time to get answers. And I am very grateful to work with such a wonderful team of people who are so dedicated to our students and our staff. And our community should and can be very proud of this group. And it doesn't get said very often, so I'm going to say it loud. This is a really good group of people who are given an inordinate amount of time making sure that we all understand what's happening, as no one's ever dealt with a situation like this before. So it is required extra time on everyone's part to learn new things, and not always fun things, but everybody's been digging in and listening and asking good questions so that we are making I believe, sound decisions based on facts and science. And our primary goal is the health and safety of everyone, and that doesn't change. So I wish everyone a great kickoff when the students are finally with us. I thank the staff for all the work they've done so far in getting ready for our students. And Mrs. Perry, you get my thanks always. Boy, I tell you, you are such an integral part, and I don't ever want to overlook you. And people need to know that Mrs. Perry keeps us all rolling along in the right direction.
Thank you, Robin.
Thank you for that. All right, that's plenty for tonight. I want to take a 5-minute break if that's okay with the rest of you folks. Is that enough time? We have an executive session, a couple of items of business to take care of. I thank anyone and everyone who took the time out to come and watch this evening and to learn. If you have questions, you know how to get a hold of us. Please ask. We'll get back to you as soon as possible. Have a great evening. Stay healthy, everyone.
He said, Tim,
So-
back on. I said, no, all we have to do is wake him.
All
All
right.
right, yeah, I think we're ready to go.
7.02. Someone move it?
Move
Move
it.
it.
Second.
There's like 3 moves.
Yeah, I know. Somebody give me a second.
Second.
Okay, thanks, Dave. All righty. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Opposed and abstentions. Thank you all. Have a great rest of your week. Stay healthy, my colleagues. I look forward to seeing you a couple weeks. Take
All
care.
righty.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great evening.
Good night.